So the mistake question is one that so many people get wrong. In my many hundreds of interviews at Amazon and before, I have to tell you, I have very rarely been impressed by people's answer to that question. And by the way, that question, it can come in many different forms. They can ask you about a time you made a mistake. They can ask you about a time where you had a particular failure. They can ask you about a time where you had a particularly challenging experience. The question can come at you in many different ways, but ultimately they're trying to ask you to explain to them about a time where something went wrong. Oh, and before I forget, if you want the notes for this particular video and indeed all of the videos in my channel, just go down to a link in the description where you will be able to click through and get hold of all of those notes pre-written for you so you don't have to write them down. All right, so back to what I was saying. In Amazon, when you are asked the questions about mistakes or failures, it's aligned to the Write a Lot leadership principle. And one of the facets in the Write a Lot leadership principle is about good judgment, making good decisions. So the question about making a mistake is essentially trying to get into understanding the decisions that you made that led to this failure. But not only are they trying to understand the decisions that you made that led to the failure, they're also then trying to understand the decisions that you made to get yourself out of the failure, or at least to recover from it once it's happened. And then the next thing they're trying to understand is the decisions that you make to try and make sure that that type of thing never happens to you again, or indeed never happens to anybody else. That's what they're looking for. Now, generally, I see three approaches from candidates in terms of how they tackle this question. And I'm going to take you through those and I'm going to tell you why I do or don't think they're a particularly good approach. So here's number one. So the first one is broadly where a candidate tells me about a mistake that they made. They tell me all about how it happened, what the experience was, maybe the choices that they made that took them to that failure. And then that's it. They don't then tell me about their recovery. They don't tell me how they managed to save the day. They literally tell me the entire part of their question/answer, all about the actual failure. Now, I don't recommend that because, as I said at the beginning, they're going to want to understand, how do you recover? Everybody fails at some point. That's not really the issue here. The issue is, how do you make good choices to pull back and recover when you've made a mistake? So don't do that one. Here's the second strategy that I've seen used. People tell me about a kind of run-of-the-mill failure. So the kind of everyday mistakes that, hey, we all make in our everyday lives. So, maybe they tell me about a deadline that they've missed and how they managed to explain away the miss of the deadline, how they managed to save time and catch up, how they managed maybe to de-scope some stuff and deliver a couple of days late, and how they explained to the people involved that they would just fix it very, very quickly. They're okay. It's not going to wow me, but neither am I going to be particularly concerned that you can't actually recover from a mistake. But I'll probably not remember that example once I've walked away from your debrief. It's not going to blow my mind. So if those are the types of examples that you have, fine, go ahead with it. It'll be okay. You'll get some merit for it, but you're unlikely to blow the interviewer away with your brilliance. The third example is where a candidate is really brave and they tell me about a catastrophic mistake that they've made. Now, that mistake can come from really, really bad judgment on their part, a momentary lapse, or actually it can often come from tiny, tiny little things that you would never have imagined would have such catastrophic unintended consequences. But they tell me about something that really went wrong, that was really a major issue for their business. But then they go on and tell me about the incredible things that they do to try and either halt the disaster, or if the disaster is a rolling boulder that they cannot stop, what they then do post the disaster to pull it back. who they talked to, what actions they took, how bold and creative they were in terms of coming up with their solutions. And then not only that, they then go on to tell me what they did in terms of reflecting on the disaster, how it came about, how they went around fixing it, and really considered what they could do to protect themselves in the future so that they never make that mistake again, or indeed, and almost even better, how they belts and braces their entire organization so that no one ever makes that mistake again. No one in the company now and no one in the company future. Now, you can probably tell from my articulation that third example are always the examples that are hugely memorable and impressive. Even if a candidate has made a major lapse in judgment to get themselves into that situation in the first place, as long as they have a really impressive recovery and they do the belts and braces, that's the bit that you remember as an interviewer, not the mistake they made at the beginning. Effectively, most people can be forgiven for a one-off lapse, big mistake. What matters is how you recover and how you protect the organization and yourself from making those mistakes in future. So when you're thinking about the version of your example you're going to come up with, as I said, don't use one. You can use two. Really cool if you can find three. But when you think about that, do also think about where you put your time investment in when you're articulating the story. My recommendation is actually that you don't spend too much time dwelling on how you got into the situation in the first place. Lots of candidates spend far too much time in answering that question, focused on how they got themselves into the situation in the first place. My recommendation is that you only use a few sentences in your situation part of your story answer to set that up. So be really brief about how this problem came about in the first place, other than if there are important details in that situation piece that you need to hang on to your task, action, and result. But in the main, be brief about how you got into that situation, because the most important thing is how you got out of it. So when you've briefly set yourself up in a situation about how you got into the mess in the first place, then you need to focus your task on how you're going to get out of it, your action, where really the meat of your example should be exactly what did you do to get yourself out of that situation or resolve the issue if it was a rolling stone that you couldn't stop. Detail, detail, detail. Of course, the result, and then finally, to my point, what was the improvement? What were the belts and braces that you identified as needing to put in place to make sure that thing never ever happened again? So now what I recommend you do is click on this link here to grab yourself a free customer obsession masterclass from my academy. If you follow that, I promise you will absolutely wow your interviewer with any question you're asked at an Amazon interview about customer obsession. And if you don't want to do that right now, why don't you have a look at this video here for more amazing tips on Amazon interview technique?